And thanks indeed for watching. You've been watching live feeds from the UK, where outgoing British Prime Minister David Cameron is making, of course, his way to the Buckingham Palace, where he'll be meeting with the Queen of England as part of preparations for his exit from government. At this time, we're sending you live feeds. Of course, you can see the convoy there being led by a motorcycle, and let's continue to see how events unfold there. The British Prime Minister, outgoing, of course, making his way to Buckingham Palace in a motorcade.
British Prime Minister David Cameron on his way to Buckingham Palace is almost there. His motorcade making its way from Downing Street, number 10, the official residence of the British Prime Minister. Now, this is where Mr. Cameron will be giving his official resignation to Queen Elizabeth II, thereby making him unofficially Prime Minister of Britain, making way for Theresa May, former Home Secretary, to become Prime Minister. Mr. Cameron has had a really long run as Prime Minister for 6 years. It was under his tenure that Britain eventually had that referendum, we remember a few weeks back, to leave the European Union. An ex-Prime Minister faces an arduous task of leading Britain out of the Union and making sure that Britain remains a strong, unified nation economically as well as politically. We're looking at aerial shots now of Buckingham Palace as Mr. Cameron makes his way into the palace to tender his resignation to the Queen. He's already there. In a few minutes, we'll see Mr. Cameron leave the motorcade and enter the palace to meet with the Queen. The second female to become Prime Minister in Britain, following Margaret Thatcher's well back in the 80s and a little into the 90s. She is known to be quite tough, although she had a different view on the Brexit referendum. She voted to stay in the European Union, while others who were in the race, the five of them, beg your pardon, who were in the race for for Conservative leader, did vote to be out of the European Union. But right now, she has to put that aside and then lead Britain out of the European Union as soon as Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty is eventually initiated. Today being a historic day in Britain as another Prime Minister leaves the 270th, I guess, finally leaving, and then making way for another woman in history to become Prime Minister of Britain. Gimba, your thoughts on this?
She'll be the 76th, if I'm getting that right, to become British Prime Minister in the next couple of weeks to months. We'll be seeing a new government. She will be forming, and new policies will now arise in the UK, just to try to, first of all, get the UK out of the European Union and chart a new front for them. But more importantly, also, that's not going to end there. We've already had commentaries being made from very prominent people in the UK that the UK will not be the only country to leave the European Union. We're going to be watching very closely to see if that happens.
The Brexit being the main issue right now, but we're seeing the aerial shots again of Buckingham Palace. David Cameron will soon be inside the palace meeting with the Queen. We do understand he could be meeting with the Queen right now. Queen Elizabeth, of course, has the procedure actually is for the Prime Minister to meet with the Queen, hand over his resignation, and then advise the Queen on who to pick as Prime Minister, who to eventually confirm as Prime Minister. In this case, there are no rivals. It's Theresa May, former Home Secretary, and then she will be advised by the Prime Minister concerning who the cabinet members will be. A really historic day it is for the rest of Britain. I'm not quite sure we see people lining up the streets to pay their final farewell to Mr. Cameron, though he made that speech outside of number 10 Downing Street. Of course, his things already moved out of number 10.
very quickly indeed they have.
Interesting indeed how all of this just turned out quickly. David Cameron announced a few weeks back that he would be resigning in September, which triggered off, this race for Conservative leadership as well as Prime Minister. But now it's really clear there's no need to wait, and that's what he said, on Monday when he gave that speech, that he'll be resigning on Wednesday.
Very much indeed. Also, he'll be much respected as a UK Prime Minister who has done really well, 6 years on the job for the UK, and of course, churning out policies that have been able to let Britain stay above waters, even at troubled times. We're looking at aerial photographs of aerial pictures of the live footages we're getting from the UK now. It's getting closer.
We'll just take a break. We'll just take a break from this and go on to let's just take a listen to what David Cameron said just before he began this journey to Buckingham Palace.
And that today are making a go of it and providing people with livelihoods. I think of the hard-working families paying lower taxes and getting higher wages because of the first ever national living wage. I think of the children who are languishing in the care system and who've now been adopted by loving families. I think of the parents now able to send their children to good and outstanding schools, including free schools, that simply didn't exist before. I think of over 200,000 young people who've taken part in National Citizen Service, the fastest growing youth programme of its kind in the world, something that again wasn't there 6 years ago. I think of the couples who've been able to get married who weren't allowed to in the past. And I think of the people on the other side of the world who wouldn't have had clean drinking water, the chance to go to school, or even be alive, were it not for our decision to keep our aid promises to the poorest people and the poorest countries in our world. And we've used our stronger economy to invest in our health service. When I walked in there were 18,000 people waiting over a year for their operation. Today, it's just 800. Too many, still too long, but our NHS is a national treasure, and one whose staff perform miracles, as I've seen, every day. And we've strengthened our nation's defences, with submarines, destroyers and frigates, and soon aircraft carriers, rolling out of our shipyards to keep our country safe in a dangerous world. These are the choices and the changes that we've made. And I want to thank everyone who's given so much support to me personally over these years. The incredible team at Number 10, the civil servants whose professionalism and impartiality is one of our country's greatest strengths, and my political advisors, some of whom have been with me since the day I stood for my party's leadership 11 years ago. I want to thank my children, Nancy, Elwyn and Florence, for whom Downing Street has been a lovely home over these last 6 years. They sometimes kick the red boxes full of work. Florence, you once climbed into one before a foreign trip and said, "Take me with you." Well, no more boxes. And above all, I want to thank Samantha, the love of my life. You have kept me vaguely sane, and as well as being an amazing wife, mother and businesswoman, you have done something every week in that building behind me to celebrate the best of voluntary service in our country. We will shortly be heading to Buckingham Palace to see Her Majesty the Queen, where I'll tender my resignation as Prime Minister. And I would advise Her Majesty to invite Theresa May to form a new administration. I'm delighted that for the second time in British history, the new Prime Minister will be a woman, and once again a Conservative. I believe Theresa will provide strong and stable leadership in fulfilling the Conservative manifesto on which we were elected, and I wish her well in negotiating the best possible terms for Britain's exit from the European Union. Let me finish by saying this. The spirit of service, our way of life. We must never forget that. In a different way, I've seen the same spirit of service in the amazing contributions of countless volunteers in communities up and down our country, who are making our society bigger and stronger. And I'm proud that every day for the past 2 years, I've used the office of Prime Minister in a non-political way to recognise and thank almost 600 of them as points of light whose service can be an inspiration to us all. For me, politics has always been about public service in the national interest. It is simple to say, but often hard to do. But one of the things that sustains you in this job is the sense that, yes, our politics is full of argument and debate, and it can get quite heated. But no matter how difficult the decisions are, there's a great sense of British fair play, a quiet but prevailing sense that most people wish their Prime Minister well and want them to stick at it and get on with the job. So I want to take this moment to say thank you to all those who've written letters and emails offering me that support, people who I'll never get to meet and never get to thank personally. It has been the greatest honour of my life to serve our country as Prime Minister over these last 6 years, and to serve as leader of my party for almost 11 years. And as we leave for the last time, my only wish is continued success for this great country that I love so very much. Thank you.
Of course, the outgoing Prime Minister, David Cameron, pretty much reeling out his scorecard, which he spoke earlier before moving down to the Buckingham Palace.
That was just before he began his journey to Buckingham Palace, where he will be tendering his resignation to Queen Elizabeth II. David Cameron is still in Buckingham Palace at this moment, but just a few things that he mentioned there: service to the nation, the spirit of service, he said, which is one of the remarkable qualities of Britons. And then he spoke about having to comfort those who had lost loved ones, especially in wars fought far away from Britain. Speaking about some of the achievements he had done in his 6 years in office, the same-sex marriage, couples were able to get married, keeping his promise to the health service, NHS, which he said is one of the most strengthened and most secure in the world. And then the support over the years, of course, of his political advisors, which he spoke about thanking everyone, including his wife, Samantha. Well, a man can't do a job like that without having a strong
supportive family.
Support.
And his children, of course, and there will be no boxes this time around, he says. Yeah. That signifies him going fully to his family and attending to family work as well. He also did talk about some of the achievements in education, having free school initiative for schools in the UK. And, of course, as you said, married couples who couldn't get married before his administration now during his administration did get married, and hopefully that will also continue into the future. He's been able to support poorer countries as well from the UK. Yes, he strengthened the nation's defences, and now he says that the UK is a much stronger force to deal with